guys, welcome back to another episode of the Life Podcast. Super pumped you are here. Thanks. I just appreciate everybody who listens to the podcast. I know there's probably only a couple people that actually listen and are invested, but shout out to you guys for making this happen. I really enjoy doing the podcast, so it's really no cost to me. If you're here though, make sure you like, subscribe, share with a friend if you think that they need it. And today's episode is going to be a good one. I know I say that every single week, but I really mean it. This week, we're actually starting a series on relationships. Pretty hot topic, I would say, especially as we head into February. There's Valentine's Day, and just kind of everybody is living in some sort of relationship, whether that be with friends, whether that be romantically, whatever it is. We all have relationships. So we're going to tackle all sorts of things from from being single, talk about what healthy relationships look like. Today's episode specifically, we're going to talk about long distance relationships, since there are so many people who are experiencing that with online dating and COVID, and everything's long distance these days. So we're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about conflict in relationships. We're going to talk about all sorts of things. And I am super excited. So with me today, I have some folks that I went to school with. I got Caden and Caleb. How are you guys doing?
Doing good, man. How are you?
Doing so good. Caden, how about you?
I'm doing good. I'm so excited.
Yeah, I'm super pumped that you guys are here, and shout out to, maybe the 30 listeners who are going to hear what you guys have to say. And I mean, here's the thing though, you're on the podcast. That means you have to share it to your social media. That's my only requirement for being on the podcast.
For sure. Absolutely.
Sweet. That's what we like to hear, get some listeners. And yeah, like I said, today we are going to be talking about long distance relationships, and you guys are currently in a long distance relationship. Can you guys just maybe introduce yourselves a little bit and then tell us just a little bit about your guys' story, how you met, how you started dating, and just kick it off.
Yeah, for sure.
Okay, you can go first.
Okay, cool. I'll give like what actually happened as far as like us meeting and dating, and then we'll let Caleb tell his version, his fantasy of what actually what happened.
Right.
So,
Right.
I'm Caden. Goodnight. I'm 23 years old. I'm a recent graduate of SUM Bible College. That's where me and Austin met and connected through that. Yep. Shout out to SUM. Apply now. sum.edu/apply. And yeah, so me and Caleb actually started dating almost 7 months ago. We met at a conference in New Orleans where it's called the Mardi Gras Outreach, and basically we just go to Bourbon Street with our Bible College SUM, and we just pray for people and minister to people and have good spiritual conversation with people on Bourbon Street during Mardi Gras. And so, as crazy as that sounds, your emotions are everywhere during that outreach because you're getting no sleep, and you're going to the streets. You're spending so many hours, and you're just exhausted. And in the midst of that, Caleb was trying to find a girlfriend. And so
Wait, let's be real though, real quick. This Mardi Gras outreach is the place to go if you're single, because that's where everybody's looking for a boyfriend, for a girlfriend, for a spouse. That's just how it goes. Uh-oh, it looks like Caden's frozen. Caleb.
Like, encourage it, endorse it.
Okay.
My bad, y'all got me?
Yeah, you were frozen for a second. Go ahead. You were talking about the Mardi Gras outreach. Keep going for it. Oh no.
Someone needs to get some new internet. I need to start buying her new internet. Come on, man.
All good. Caleb, why don't you pick up the story for us, man?
Yeah, so we're at Mardi Gras, and I don't remember which night it was, because I think there's like 4 or 5 nights that we go out on the street, we pray for people, talk with people, do the whole shebang, right? So we're going out there, and I'm with my partner, and we're praying for people, and I'm like eating a snack or something. And this girl walks by, and she had like on these pretty cool camo pants. And I'm a fashion guy myself, right? I will spend big money on clothes. It's one of my many downfalls, right? I love fashion. So I saw this girl walking by, and she had some pants, and I was like, hey, like those are some pretty cool pants. Now looking back, it's really weird to say. Like I really get that now. But in the moment, I was like, man, I'm so smooth. So I was like, hey, those are some cool pants. And then we met again on the street, and I asked her how old she was, and I asked her some other questions, which was kind of weird because we're supposed to be ministering to people and supposed to be praying for people, and I'm trying to, swoon my way into this girl's life. So so that happened, and then back at the hotel where the entire school's staying, where the conference itself is happening, I stopped her in the hallway and I was like, hey, totally forgot, what's your name? I forgot your name, which is super embarrassing. And then she made some big deal about it. She like flipped out. She's like, what the heck? Like, you forgot my name? And then she told me her name, and then we started talking about ministry and tattoos and talking about where we were from and how I'm from California and she's from Mississippi. And then she came with me and my friends and we got coffee one day. And then I went with her and her friends and went to IHOP and she got me food poisoning. So that was kind of cool.
Nice.
And then the next day we stayed up from about, it was probably like 10 p.m. So it was about 10 p.m. to like about 6 a.m. because I had an 8 a.m. flight. So we stayed up from 10 p.m. to 6 a.m. to talking, hanging out, getting to know each other. And then I asked her if I could, text her or call her, and she said yeah. So then we started FaceTiming ever since. And then in July 7th, when I asked her to be my girlfriend.
Nice. What a story. What a story. Now, Caden,
Right.
Is that how it really happened?
Okay, so he actually covered it pretty accurately. I'm not gonna lie. So yeah.
Wow, I was really hoping for some drama to happen, but you know what? I like that. I like honesty.
Well, I mean, it's funny because before I met her, I actually met her sister, and I didn't know it.
Oh wow.
Right, and I wasn't trying to, date her sister. I just met her sister first.
Right. That's awesome. So it's great to hear you guys' story. I've actually never heard it before. I've seen glimpses of it. But what were some things just prior to you guys dating? You guys are both godly people, just want to pursue the Lord and all that he has for your life. And so that obviously affects the way that you do things. So what were some things that you did while you were single to prepare for being in a relationship, and not just a relationship? I mean, you obviously didn't expect to be, I'm sure, in a long distance relationship, but what were some things that you did while you were single to really prepare yourself for a relationship?
I think like this will be like a decent transition, I think, from the last question into this question. One thing that we did not expect outside of the long distance relationship is an international pandemic that stopped flights and stopped travel. Especially it'd be different if Calyb lived like 8 or 9 hours away. Like that's one form of long distance, but we live 1,200 or not 1,200. Yeah, 1,200 miles apart, 1,900 miles apart. That's what it is. And so it's far. And so before we went into the pandemic, we didn't know anything about a pandemic. Is whenever we met late February, right before March. And so before we ever decided for sure that like we wanted to date and we were kind of praying about things, we talked about standards. And one of those standards was Calyb actually told me, he was like, before I ask you out, I really would love to have a conversation with your parents face to face. And this was pre-pandemic. And so this is a standard that we set. So a lot of people will ask, like, why did you guys wait so long to date? Because we met in February and we spent 5 months getting to know each other, right? From February to July. And so people will ask, like, why did you wait so long? But ultimately we had set that standard and that goal. And even though there was a pandemic and we had no idea how long it was going to take before we could fly and see each other, we held true to that goal and that standard that we had set. And so prior to that, I think like as ministers and people who are used to having to have a bit of a higher standard as far as what you look for in what you wear, what you listen to, and especially your relationships and what you entertain, we were already in that mindset of my standard is up here, and whatever doesn't meet that, I can't entertain that. I don't have time or space for it.
Yeah,
and so for myself personally, I had prior to Calyb. So Calyb is my first boyfriend that I've had in my whole life. I had my first boyfriend whenever I was 23 years old, which is, people don't believe it. It's crazy. But he is my first boyfriend. And prior to him, I had gone through a season of where I had a boy that I was interested in that just let me down. It just didn't work out. And I buckled down. And for the first time in my life, I was genuine with God. And I told him, I was like, not the first time I was genuine with him, but the first time I was genuine about this.
Wow.
Yeah.
And I had said, I was like, God, if I don't start dating until my late 20s, early 30s, like I'm good. And it sounds crazy, but I meant it in that season. I was like, it's you and me, we're going to run. And I don't even want, in my mind, I was like, I don't even want a relationship to step in between what we have right now. And so Prior to that, that's when I started taking on more speaking engagements than ever. I started jumping into anything behind the scenes that I could do to help at my church, and reaching out to different ministers and connecting as much as I could in that season. And that is that short season. It was only 5 months prior to me meeting Calyb, which I had no idea I was going to meet him.
Yeah.
That's where my roots and my relationship with God were really, really set. And so me and Calyb have talked about it, and we're like, if we break up, which we don't plan to, or we wouldn't be together. But
Yeah.
if we were to break up, like, it would be hard. Like, it would not be a good time, but I would be okay. And I know, and it comes from the place of, I'm so confident in my relationship with God and that connection that I built during that time, that now I'm like, I love you, but like, I don't need that anymore, you know? And so that's what I did in my single season to really genuinely prepare for Calyb. And I
Yeah,
didn't even know
no,
it.
that's really good. I think what's super important about what you're saying and is because as Christians, especially Christians who are going into ministry, going into Bible college, there's this huge emphasis, especially around pastors and whoever's in ministry, that you have to be married, you have to be in a relationship, you can't be single. And like, it's a frenzy to try to find a spouse. And it's honestly kind of ridiculous. Like I oftentimes have a hard time speaking about relationships. Here's my backstory a little bit. I have been with my now wife since I was 16. And so,
Wow.
yeah, I mean, that's a long story, of course, that we could tell another time, maybe today. But so I never had that really single season to really kind of find, God, find who I was. And I've never had to experience the struggle that a lot of other ministers have, where they think I need to find a wife. But I think it's so important that you um, got right with God. I mean, not that you were right with God, but you really said, you know what, God, like, whatever your will is for my life, like, I will submit to that. And I think that's the most important statement that you could make. We have a pastor on staff here at my church who is 30 or 31, and he's single, and he is living his best life. And I love to see it. So I love what you said. Calyb, what about you, man?
Yeah, so there was a few things that I did in my single season, but first, actually, before Caden and I started dating, I actually had a girlfriend way prior to her. So me and this other girl, we dated for almost 4 years.
Oh, wow.
So yeah, pretty long time. And then when we broke up, I realized how much of my security and purpose I found in that person.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So in those 2.5 years after me and that person broke up, I really took the time to work on myself, not only spiritually, like reading your Bible more and really understanding scripture, but trying to figure out what are my pros and cons of who I am, right? What are things I'm good at? What are things I'm not good at, right? And let me try to improve on some of those things that I'm not good at, and just making myself better. One thing that Rich Wilkerson Jr. said, he said, be the person who you're looking for is looking for.
Yeah, that's good.
I was like, man, that's super good. You know what I mean? Like, if I was that girl that I want to date, what would I be looking?
Yeah. No, I feel that, man. That's awesome.
So I was always trying to look at, yeah. So I was always trying to look at it through that mindset. And then the last thing real quick is, me and my youth pastor sat down at Wingstop one day, and we were just having lunch and talking, and I was just really struggling because I had got rejected like 4 or 5 times, like legit. Like, I'd ask girls out and they're like, yeah, sorry. And I was like, dang, man, this sucks. Like, I had the whole, bitter nice guy thing going on.
Yeah.
It got me down, and we wrote a list of non-negotiables of things that I'm looking for in a wife. Not a girlfriend, but a wife.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, so we put pen to paper of things that I'm looking for in standards that if a girl doesn't meet, sorry, kick rocks. Because she has to meet all these things, and some were cool and some were ridiculous, but some were spiritual. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So those are some of the practical things I did.
Yeah, that's really good. I love that. And I love that both of you guys kind of said the same thing, that you really need to know who you are before hopping into a relationship, because otherwise you'll get lost and entangled. And if something messy happens, you're losing half of yourself in that. To be honest with you, if my wife and I would have split before we got married, my life would have been a mess. Like, I mean, I was still developing. I was 16 years old. Like, they say your brain's not developed till you're like 25 or 30 or whatever. And I mean, I would have been a mess. We'll just say that. We'll leave it at that. So I love your guys' answers. That's amazing. I like to hear that. I like to hear people that are doing it the right way, even if it takes some time to get rejected or to, even have a prior relationship. Like God brought you to this moment and is teaching you so many things. So that's amazing. So you guys, here we go. I was looking at the wrong question here. So you guys started off in a long distance relationship. What have been some of the biggest struggles that you guys have faced in that? Whoever wants to start us off.
I think for me, the hardest struggle is probably not just trying to get to know Caden, but trying to get to know her family and friends. You know what I mean? So like when you date somebody that already goes to your church, you sort of know the history of that person. You might have similar friends, you might know family, so that's pretty easy. But I talked to her on the phone. So unless like I FaceTime her dad or FaceTime her sisters, like I don't get to know anybody. So the first time I flew out there, like I had no knowledge of anybody, really of who they were, what they acted like, how far I could go as far as humor and boundaries. Like I had to figure everything out on the spot. So for me, that was the hardest part, is stepping into this pool of the unknown as far as knowing who people are and having those relationships with not just her, but her friends and her family and sisters and all that stuff.
Yeah. Caden, what about you?
There are a few things. So long distance there's a lot of good things, which I know we'll talk about a little bit later, but there's also been a lot of struggle. Obviously the distance is hard. I think one thing that is a little more difficult about long distance is it demands more communication than even your average relationship, because we have life to do, like imagine how busy you are when you're in a relationship. Trying to make time for that person is really difficult when you live in the same town and you can see each other, pretty much as often as you want to. Couples still complain that they can't make time for each other. Well, when you're long distance and your time zones are 2 hours apart and you both work full time, and one's in school full time and the other one runs a school full time, it's a lot. And so making time for each other to really talk and communicate, we have to prioritize. And so there'll be weeks where we're both working so hard and there's a lot going on, just to be like totally transparent. And we'll have a few days where we only have like a few random 10-minute FaceTime phone calls. And that's like all the connection that we get for a few days at a time. Wow. And usually by like day 4 or 5, Calyb knows and he's like feeling it that I'm like off. Yeah. And we'll have to like take a second and be like, okay. And so just like you would have to move things, or I think there's the illusion that you don't have to shift your schedule for quality time like you would if you were in person. But like I said, it's an illusion. It doesn't hold. So there are still events that I miss, or different like outing. Like my friends will go hang out and they're like, hey, you want to come? And I'm like, no, I really need to call Calyb tonight. Yeah. Because you have to prioritize communication and quality time with each other. And so definitely, I have become a much better communicator because of Calyb, because I've had to learn how to accurately communicate how I feel through a FaceTime phone screen without even being in person. And so it's definitely helped me and equipped me in that area. So yeah, for me, I think the distance and just having to make time is really difficult. But we do it.
Yeah, that's really awesome. I think, a lot of, like you said, a lot of people who can see each other every day aren't even making time for each other. Like, for example, me and my wife, we live together, but we still have to make time because, sleeping next to somebody and just doing your day-to-day routine is not quality time. Like you have to be intentional. And I mean, my wife will tell me this. I've heard it a few times. She'll say, listen, because we live together doesn't mean we're spending time together. I say, all right, you got me.
Right,
That's my bad. That's my bad. I'll take that one. What are some positive things maybe that have come out of a long distance relationship?
So, okay, I'll go. So, it's not all bad, honestly. One thing that my favorite thing about us starting out long distance, because obviously we don't plan to be long distance forever, right, is that I tell people during the quarantine, whenever all we could do is literally all we could do is like talk all day, because we couldn't leave our houses other than when he had to work. And so we would talk for hours a day, like 5 or 6 hours a day. And during that time, I got to know him so well and he got to know me so well, that I genuinely feel like we know each other. We knew each other going into our first week of dating. We knew each other better than most people knew, years into dating, because we spent so much time getting to know each other through communication. And one thing I think long distance does is everybody, I mean, we're all physical creatures, right? And so physically there's a relationship or intimacy that happens between a guy and a girl when you like each other and you want that physical connection, holding hands or
When? What are you talking about? I have no clue what you're talking about.
chill.
Yeah,
so so anyway, like you want to hold hands, you want to sit close to each other, like that's natural and that's cool or
yeah,
whatever. But I think too many relationships that you find that are fickle or don't last or don't hold are because people often confuse physical intimacy with emotional intimacy. And they don't take
Absolutely.
time to build that emotional intimacy because they are too busy filling their time with physical intimacy. And so, like, maybe we're not having conversation, but we're cuddling on the couch and holding hands. And so we love each other. And so then you find out, years later that he's got this like deep rooted issue that you could have figured out in the beginning if you didn't prioritize your fit. Not that it's not shouldn't be a priority at all, but it shouldn't be prioritized over that emotional intimacy. And so from the get-go, I was like, man, it's a good thing that you've got a great personality, because if you didn't, we wouldn't have made it, because all we had was
yeah.
talking to each other. We didn't have anything else so that one of my favorite parts about long distance is the fact that it forced me to get to know Calyb like inside and out, just because all we have really is communication.
Yeah. No, that's awesome. I'm actually glad you brought that up because I wanted to ask you guys this as I was, thinking about this episode, and sort of off the cuff. You really don't have to answer this if you don't want to, but so many couples, myself and my wife included, struggled with, intimacy before marriage and, pushing the boundaries, seeing how far I can get, what's the line I can go to and not cross it, but, be on it. Like so many couples struggle with, sexual sin and things like that. So if you're comfortable answering that question, has that been like, is that something that's there in a long distance relationship? Because like you said, when you're together, you can be physical, you can touch, you can hold hands, you can hug, whatever. But in a long distance relationship, that looks a little bit different. So you guys totally don't have to answer that question. And if you don't want to, I'll edit it out. Like that's fine. But I'm just curious.
No, it's fine.
I think we're comfortable. Yeah.
So when we're in Mississippi, so when I fly out to go see her, wherever we are, we could be watching Teletubbies on the TV. Someone is always there with us. If it's her parents, if it's a sister, whoever it is, someone is always there.
Yeah.
So unless we're gonna, just say screw it, I mean, stuff's not happening. You know what I mean?
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. When we're here in California, same thing. I think my mom sort of saw. I say my mom because I still live with her. In my last relationship, she was more lenient. You know what I mean? So I think with this one now, she makes sure that someone is always there.
Yeah.
Whether we're in the car driving, whether I live a mile from my church, well, she'll drive us to the church. You know what I mean? Like we're not in my office together alone. We're not really in a building together alone. There's cameras at my church. There's cameras at my house. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I mean, there's things that we're conscious about to making sure that we don't put ourselves in situations where we can be compromised.
Yeah. No, that's awesome.
And it's not. And then one thing too to speak to it is like, it's not like we're never completely alone, but it's not like we never have time to just like, because it sounds suffocating to think of like you can't even like sit on the couch and like watch a movie without somebody else being there. So like we have created, I think, a respect for the people around us and a respect for each other. And where whenever I come to California, if we want to watch a movie on his couch, his parents are hanging out in their bedroom or whatever, you know what I mean? Like we just don't put ourselves in a position where it's just going to be me and him hanging out by ourselves in his room. You know what I mean? Like we guard ourselves that way. But even as far as like long distance, kind of speaking to what you were talking about, like how it's just different as far as that, like I said, the quarantine forced us to learn how to communicate. And so we have actually sat down, and I'm not going to say it's the most fun conversation, but I think a lot of the time we wait until the heat of the moment to make the decision of is this okay or is this not okay? And that's a bad spot to be in, to make the decision, because your flesh is going to tell you one thing and your spirit's trying to tell you another thing. And a lot of time when you're in the moment, your flesh is going to win over every time. So we've taken a moment to just sit down and have the conversation face to face, not all cuddled up together, not like, you know what I mean? But like just sit down and have a conversation and say, what not like what do you want in this moment, but like what ultimately what do you feel like is sin and what do you feel like is not sin? What do you feel like convicts you or makes you feel like we should not do this, and what is okay? Because ultimately at the end of the day, like even the reason that we are together and like wanting to get married is because we love each other, but ultimately we want to follow the will of God and we want to stay in his will. And
Yeah.
so a lot of the time that takes intentional awkward conversation to be able to figure that out.
Yeah, that's awesome. It's awesome that you recognize that and you set those boundaries. You hear of guys like, for example, Billy Graham, one of the greatest evangelists to have ever lived, right? He always said that he
Right.
would never ever be alone with a woman. Like he always had somebody there with him. And of course, he passed away and his honor and his legacy has not been touched. And honestly, like I've just heard of Ravi Zacharias, one of the world's like greatest
Oh man, don't get me started.
yeah, and then all these allegations are coming out, and it's just terrible because there was obviously boundaries that weren't set. There were lines that were crossed, and it's never just like a line that's crossed one time in my experience. And from what I've heard from other people, it's always like, well, it's small little steps over time that
Right.
lead to a really
Right.
bad decision. And so these small, unwise decisions lead to ultimately your demise or your fall or whatever, because I've been in those shoes
Right.
and I know what it's like. And so it's so encouraging to hear you guys say that. And for anybody out there who might be in a relationship, not married yet, this is great advice. I hope you're taking note of this and writing it down, or, watching this, record it, read it, or watch it over and over again, whatever you got to do, because this is good. So good. So yeah. Did you guys both answer about positive things? I don't remember, to be honest.
I don't think Caleb said anything. Yeah.
No, I didn't. One positive thing, and I mean, this might sound not negative, but might sound bad, is we are still able to live our own lives while being in this relationship. You know what I mean?
Yeah, for sure.
So like we're dating and we're talking and communicating and we're committed, but she's living in Mississippi and I'm here in California.
Yeah.
So it's not like I have to completely change my entire world and like quit my job and go do everything just to please her. You know, like we understand that we have different lives before we ever started dating. You know what I mean? Like I had job, I had friends, I had things I did before she started dating, and we haven't tried to take that stuff away. Like if she wants to go hang out with some friends, I'm like, yeah, go ahead, go hang out. Call me later. I'll do whatever I want to do.
Yeah.
And I think that's something I didn't have in my last one. And looking back, now that I do have it, it's like, man, this is like it's like the best thing that's a part of it. You know what I mean?
Yeah, that's awesome. I'm glad you said that. My wife and I keep referencing my own relationship because that's my only experience, but
no, I love it. It's cool.
Yeah. We started dating in high school, and that was one of the biggest things that I had to struggle with. Even like, for example, when I graduated, I really wanted, like, I had an opportunity to go play college basketball. I was like set on it, but I was like, my wife, like, or my girlfriend at the time, like, she's going to stay here. I don't want to be away from her. And so a huge part of that decision to stay in my hometown and go to community college was because she was here. I don't regret it. Like, I'm not saying this is a bad thing, but I'm saying, like, had we not been together or whatever, like, I definitely would have made a different choice. And I think it's because, I was trying to like live like we were married in a sense, even though we weren't. So
Right.
I'm glad you said that. That's really awesome.
Yeah. Well, I think you have to understand things you're willing to give up. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like going to play pool on Tuesdays. Like, is it really that important? You know what I mean? Right. Obviously we understand like Sundays and Wednesdays, me and Caden don't really talk. Because Sundays, she's 2 hours ahead. So when I wake up, she's mid-service. So we have service all day. Wednesday, I'm usually preaching and she's doing worship. So Wednesday we're busy all day because I'm setting up. So you have to realize what things are worth fighting for and what things are not. You know what I mean?
Yeah, that's good. That's good. I love that. So moving on to the next question, what are some things that you two are doing now to maintain a healthy relationship and a Christ-centered relationship at that?
One thing that we do that's like very practical is we started this recently. Actually, I don't know why we started recently, but we did. We started praying like together, even over FaceTime every night. So we alternate turns. He doesn't just pray and I don't just pray, because we both genuinely believe that although like we believe scripture that calls the man to be the head of the household, and we believe all that. We genuinely do, but we also believe but we also believe that that if we're called to eventually become one, that we're going to be called to lead together. And so there's going to be times neither should be dragging the other. There's going to be times where I have to help lead him. There's going to be times where he has to help lead me. And so we alternate turns, praying over each other. Like I said, we keep communication is so important. So we communicate. If he feels that I'm off or I'm upset, instead of avoiding it, instead of being like, okay, I know she's upset, but let's just kind of like have conversation. Or like if he knows something's off, he'll say, Caden, like he'll not just like call me really quickly, like he'll wait till he's in a space where he knows he has room to talk to me about it. And he'll be like, Caden, are you okay? And then usually I try to brush it off or like internalize whatever I'm feeling. And I'm like, yeah, I'm fine. And he's like, no, like let's talk, let's unpack whatever. Cause I can tell you're upset. I can tell you're off. So like, let's talk about it. And so one thing that I think that we do is really healthy is, like I said, we make space for each other. I know that he's busy. He, as a junior high pastor, and he helps on worship team, and he works and he goes to school. Like I said, like he is absolutely slammed. And anybody who's in ministry knows that ministry is not a clock in, clock out kind of job. You're a minister 24/7. It's your life. Yeah. And but because we're both ministers at different churches with different events on different days, on top of everything, man, it gets hard. But we will push other things aside to make space for each other. And because of that, like one of my favorite things that I tell people is that we've disagreed. Like we've disagreed, but we have never gotten like a fight or like where we were like genuinely like arguing. And one thing that we said like from the jump is like, if you say something or do something that makes me upset, I will not hang up the phone on you. Like if we're FaceTiming, I'm not going to get mad and hang up, because that's toxic. That's not healthy.
Yeah,
Let's
pause on that for a second, because this is good. When I got married, I had a guy that I worked with. He's probably listening to this podcast, to be honest. Tony, if you're listening to this, my guy, this is about you. I love you. He would ask me religiously, like every single day. He's like, so have you guys had a big fight yet? Have you guys had a big fight yet? Because like for some reason, the expectation is when you're in a relationship or when you're married, that you're supposed to have these crazy arguments, these big fights. Right. Like my wife and I never got into big fights or disagreements or argument. Like we obviously, bicker and argue like a couple does, but it's not like we're screaming at each other, we're yelling, we're throwing things, we're hanging up, we're giving each other the silent treatment. Like that's just immature and childish. And that's what a lot of people are doing. But I'm glad you said that, because I would say when you're arguing and yelling and throwing things, like that's a sign of toxicity and unhealthiness. And so keep going. Sorry to interrupt you.
No, you're good. We decided from the jump, we were like, I said, if no matter how upset I get at you, I will never hang up the phone on you, because that's the equivalent of us getting in an argument face to face and me just leaving. Right. And like forcing myself out of the conversation. So everything that we have ever disagreed on or needed, like we have conversation about it. And that is our go-to. We have conversation. We look at scripture. If it's something like that intense, like we look at scripture to see like what we believe and how we should respond. But ultimately we have lots of conversation. And so I feel like that's probably one of the most important things that we do to kind of maintain a healthy relationship. But it is definitely a stereotype. People are like, oh, don't worry, like it's coming, like you're gonna have your big fight. And I'm like, dog, don't speak that over me.
Dude, like, I hated that when people would say that to me.
Yeah, no, we don't fight.
Yeah. One thing that my wife and I have put in place sort of as like a boundary is when we start, getting into these heated conversations or, call them arguments, call them whatever you want. But we have said that if we're going to debate something, like we will not raise our voices, because as soon as your voice is raised, it leads to, heightened emotions. People get hurt, people get offended. So as soon as like my wife and I have literally been in mid conversation and one of us will raise our voice and the other one will be like, oh, I'm not talking to you anymore because you're raising your voice. Like if we can calm down, like it might sound weird and like you're talking to a kid, but it's true, because as soon as I start to like get mad and angry and get loud, things get heated, and that's when it gets bad. So that's just one thing that we do, of course.
Yeah. But I've literally told Caleb one time, it was a really petty thing, but it made me very upset in the moment. And we were on FaceTime, and as soon as he said it, he was like, Caden, Caden, and I was like, I really need a second because I might say something that I'm gonna have to apologize for.
What did
And
I
I was
say?
like, it was whenever you were in Oregon on
Oh, okay,
vacation.
yeah.
And so I literally said, he was like, do you want to talk about it? And I was like, I need 10 minutes to get on Pinterest and like not think about it and stew over it. And then I said, give me
Yeah.
10 minutes and then we'll talk about it. And we stayed on FaceTime, but I muted myself and he muted himself. And that way I wasn't hanging up on him. I wasn't saying, I'll talk to you when I feel like it. I literally was like, to have a healthy conversation, I need to not be this emotional. So I'll be back. Give me 10 minutes
Yeah.
to like, whew, and then I'll be back.
Yeah.
Well,
That's great.
one thing that I think is important is, and this is just leadership in general, is understanding how that person responds and acts.
Absolutely.
You know what I mean? So for me, I'm very much like, tell me what's wrong right now. Let's fix it right now. Like, you know, like this. Like, let's not waste any time. Let's do it right now. I don't care how you're feeling. She's very much like, let's take a second. I'm gonna breathe. I'll come back in 15 minutes and we'll talk about it. And I'm like sitting here like, no, let's do it now. We're here now. Let's do it now.
Yeah.
So I had to learn, okay, if I make her mad, take half an hour and then we'll talk about it because then we can both be civil. You know what I mean? So
Right.
it takes understanding your person and what makes them mad, how they respond, you know, what things make them tick, what things don't. You know what I mean? And I think that's something I didn't do my last one, and I think that's why I've tried to do it so much now, is try to understand Caden the best that I can. So when situations like that do arise, I can respond responsibly and correctly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, I love
And
that.
I think we're both very intentional. Like, I feel like we try to be very self-aware and then aware of each other, like Calyb was saying. So like, one of the first things we ever talked about, actually the reason he even got we like swapped phone numbers is because we were talking about the Enneagram. So
Nice.
like I love the Enneagram.
What
And
number are you? Come on.
you're not gonna believe it. I'm an 8.
You're an
I
8
mean,
through and through.
I'm the strongest 8. Like, I'm such an 8, and Caleb's a strong 3.
I would have
And
guessed 3
so
for Calyb. I'm a 3. I get it.
Yeah, I'm super
yeah,
emotional and I need affirmation. That's
Yep.
about it.
I'm there, man.
and I'm like, I don't need your affirmation. I just need you to like, I need you to need me. You know what I mean? Like, I don't need affirmation. But
Yeah.
one thing we have had multiple conversations, and this was mainly in the beginning stages where off the bat I was like, okay, like I was like, what's your love language? Like, as we were like exploring into a romantic side, I was like, what are your love languages? Like, in order. And we actually discovered ours are flipped.
Oh,
So
no.
mine, like literally exactly. So mine is acts of service, then quality time, then gifts, then physical touch, then words of affirmation. His is literally, my 1 to 5 is his 5 to 1. So
Right.
it's literally flipped. And so we learned like, okay, words of affirmation is the hardest way for me to give and receive love, but I know it's Caleb's top way to give and receive love. So we became aware of that. And I was like, man, I just need to let him know, like, man, that message you preached in youth this week, that was awesome. Like, I'm so proud of you for being able to maintain a relationship and healthy relationship with your family and your church, and vice versa. It's hard to do acts of service from long distance, but he's done his very best.
Yeah.
And so becoming, like he said, learning each other, becoming aware of each other, that's really important.
Yeah. That's so good. Is there anything else that you guys would speak to that as far as,
Well,
I'll go for it.
I'm not sure if this even fits, but it's just been on my mind. One thing that I did when Caden and I first started talking and looking at dating was I went to almost all of my pastors. My senior pastor, my youth pastor, our small groups pastor at the time, and then our kids pastor. And I talked with all of them, and they FaceTime with me and Caden, and I told them about her and what she's doing and where she's from, because I trusted them and trusted their discernment to tell me if this person wasn't it. Because that's happened before. Like this one time, I asked this girl on a date. I hope she doesn't see this because she'll be so mad. I messaged her. I was like, hey, like we should get coffee. And she's like, yeah. And this was the first date I got in like 2 years. I was like, dude, heck yes, I'm in. Let's go. You know what I mean? Super excited. And then my youth pastor, he came up to me. He was like, hey, dude, that girl's not good. I'm like, what do you mean? He's like, she works at the hair salon that I go to, and you know, I overhear her say some stuff and stuff she does. She's like, she's not a good person, man. And I was trying to justify it. I was like, well, like, what if we just got coffee? And like, what if you went there, but she didn't know who you were? You know, I was trying to justify it. But he was like, hey, man, she's not good. I'm telling you, trust me. And praise the Lord, I trusted him. I canceled. I made up some random excuse, and we didn't go.
Oh, no.
But I I trusted my pastors enough to help me make the decision that, hey, based on their discernment and what they see in a good relationship, hey, they're for it.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's a good deal right there. Now I got to ask, I meant to ask this earlier, but we were right in the middle of conversation. Where did you vacation to in Oregon? Because your boy's in Oregon.
Shoot. There's like some animal thing that you like drive through. You know what I mean?
Oh yeah.
It's like some zoo you drive through.
Yeah.
I'm awful with location. I don't know.
Yeah.
Where's that at?
Was it like, did you guys drive up to Oregon?
Yeah.
All right. Maybe like Southern Oregon, probably. I don't know.
It was an awful vacation. I'm so sorry.
Oh.
The entire vacation, all it was just us spending in the car for like 6 to 7 hours a day, just driving and looking at trees. And I'm totally not a nature guy. Like this is gonna sound really bad and unpopular. I hate nature. I can't stand nature. I don't get hikes. I don't get trees. I don't know. It doesn't make sense to me.
Yeah.
So I was like, it was boring. But yeah, I think Southern Oregon, right on the border.
Dude, the funniest thing about that vacation was he was supposed to go to Rome, and then the pandemic hit, so they just drove.
Yeah, I forgot. I was supposed to fly out to Italy and have 2 weeks in Rome and like see the world and like, go on a boat. And I was eat beignets and have real spaghetti. And I was stuck in a Pontiac for 15 hours looking at trees. Like, what the heck is this, dude? I didn't sign up for this.
Dude, I asked because I was like, where is anybody vacationing to in Oregon? I was genuinely curious.
Yeah, I don't know. We stayed in some hotel and swam in the pool and looked at trees. That's all we did.
Classic. Love it. All right, guys. Is there anything else that you want to add to, whether it be long distance relationships in general, anything else? Anything you guys got to say?
Yeah. I'll start it real quick. When you brought up Ravi Zacharias, unfortunately, those things have come out, and there's been other pastors recently that we've heard about. I think, especially if you're a pastor and you're going to be in ministry, but just in relationships in general, accountability.
Absolutely.
I cannot say it enough. I can't tell you how many people I've seen, whether they're in ministry or not, that get compromised, end up doing something they regret. It's because they didn't have accountability. There's nothing like too much accountability. You know what I mean? Like Mike Todd was talking one time, and he said he has like 3 or 4 different pastors that have his passwords to his email, his phone, all his social media, his banking stuff, like everything. Because he wants to be held accountable for everything. Because like the Bible says, if we are teachers, we're held to a higher standard.
Yeah.
And when we accept that calling, we place ourselves at that higher standard. So accountability is huge. I cannot stress it enough.
Yeah. If I may ask, what does that look like for you guys? Or maybe individually, what does that look like?
So together, like I said earlier, we always have someone in the car with us. I don't message either my students, like female students, like junior hires or high schoolers. I don't message them personally, don't message them over any social media. I talk to the parents directly. I always make sure that if I'm with a female, whether it's here at the church, whatever, someone's near me, someone's next to me, someone knows about it. I mean, never giving, you know what I mean? Like, I would rather be over careful and over precautious than ever, give someone anything to say, oh, this person did this, or, maybe he did that. You know what I mean? My office door is always open. I mean, like, yeah.
Yeah. No, that's awesome. Thanks for sharing that. Caden, any last thoughts?
Yeah, I think one thing to kind of tag on to what Calyb said is like being proactive about taking care of each other and making sure that you're being open and honest with each other. One thing that Calyb did that I never asked him to do and did not expect of him is like literally a week after he left from seeing me in December, is he shared his location with me. I didn't have to ask him, because like if you ask someone for their location, like you might have a good heart about it, but ultimately if he would have been like, hey, will you go ahead and share your location with me? I'd be like, why do you need to know where I'm, like, can you not just ask me where I'm at? You know what I mean? So the fact that Calyb, that's one thing that feeds like my love language, acts of service. He's so proactive about doing those kinds of things, to where it's not like it's not a weird or an awkward thing. I don't feel like I have to check it, but for different situations, like he was just like, hey, he just sent me his location, and was like, hey, I'm gonna add you to my Life 360 if that's okay. Like we can have a circle or whatever it is on that. And so I think just being proactive instead of waiting for the awkward moment where you need to have those kinds of things, those kind of boundaries or accountability or whatever. I have a mentor in my life. Shout out to Miss Nada. She is basically my second mom, and she's practically raised me. And when I tell you, this woman is blunt, like when you think of the church woman who like will tell you like it is, and like in the most loving way, she will literally sit me down after I've gone to see Calyb twice, and after both trips she caught me like on my way, like passing through her office, and she was like, okay, talk to me, like did anything happen we need to know about? Like, I mean, genuinely checked on me. And I keep those kind of people in my corner. Like Calyb said, he went to his pastors and that kind of thing. And I try really hard to keep people in my life, not that tell me exactly what I need to hear. And this is outside of Calyb, but I tell, or tell me what I want to hear. I literally like to keep the people who intimidate me and tell me what I need. And she is definitely one of those people. And so, and then last thing is that I think that whenever it's God, you genuinely know it. And I think about it in the sense that like if I wanted to be in a relationship with somebody who wasn't in church and wasn't in ministry, it doesn't even have to just apply to specifically a ministry context. I could do so, and I could probably still be in ministry. I could probably still have a job somewhere and lived with and get married to and be in a relationship with someone that's not saved. But whenever you go ahead and find somebody who is in the same mentality as you, like has the same beliefs, man, it knocks out like so many possible issues. Whereas if I would have compromised and lowered that standard, it would have been so much harder from us from the jump. So from the beginning, we knew right off the bat, like, we don't believe in sex before marriage. That's not a conversation we have to have or an awkward situation we have to put ourselves in because we believe the same already. You know, we don't have to discuss, do you like to get drunk on the weekends or do you like to, you know what I mean? Like we have those standards already. And so that's why I think where the Bible talks about being equally yoked, walking with someone, it doesn't say you need to reach for somebody who you feel like is way up here and don't reach way below your standard. Walk with somebody who's walking where you're walking and stay that pace with them. And so ultimately, whenever God's in the center of it, man, it's better than a dream. I say that all the time. Like even 2,000 miles apart, like I would rather be with Calyb 2,000 miles apart from each other than be with somebody else next door, you know? And so
yeah. Well, one last thing real quick, Austin.
yeah.
It is better to be single and inside the will of God than be married and outside the will of God. You know, now I'm not married, but I know a lot of people who are married and outside the will of God. And I know that marriages aren't healthy and they're toxic. And I know single people who are inside the will of God and they're living their best life and they love God and they love ministry. You know, it is better to be single and inside the will of God than married and dating someone because you can do all the fun things and be outside the will of God. You know, you have to surrender down what you want or what you think you want to God's will. And that takes a lot of humility and laying yourself down and saying, God, you know, this situation is yours. Your ways are higher than my ways. You know more than I do, so I'm trusting you. And even if you never get married, perfect. But you're following God, and that's the biggest thing.
Yeah. Yeah, that's so
I'm
good.
not called to that life. I can tell you that right now.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, let's be real. Some of our biggest fears being called to being single. Come on.
Right.
I've literally,
absolutely.
you know, you pray, God, please send me someone before the rapture happens. Please.
Oh yeah, that's what all the Christian
man.
memes are about these days.
Exactly.
Yeah, no, honestly, I love to hear you guys talk about this as you're not married, as you are still in the midst of it, because honestly, it's so encouraging to hear from people who are obviously you want to hear from people who have done it and experienced it well, but it's so great to hear from people who are living in it, living in the thick of it, and you know, kind of navigating it for themselves and feeling the water. So I just love to hear your guys' story. And a last thought that I have that I'd like to share, if anybody cares to listen, but one thing that has been so helpful in my relationship and I think would be helpful in any relationship is even long distance. And it sounds like you guys are doing this, but you have to give grace. I've said this on the podcast before, but
right.
You guys, you know, talked about, you know, getting in arguments or whatever, debating things. Like we're not going to get it right all the time. So don't pretend like you are. We're not going to be perfect to our spouse. So don't pretend like you are. but you have
Right.
to give grace. And when you give grace, it gives that other person an opportunity to really like, for you guys as a couple to work through and walk through a lot of things together. So one thing that I just love about my wife is that she's so patient with me in the many mistakes that I do make. And so I'm so thankful for the grace that she's given. Even in just everyday little scenarios, like maybe I miscommunicated something and she thought I was going to be home sooner than I actually was. Like there's grace for that because it was a mistake, you know? So even little things that could lead to an argument ultimately, but she gives grace. I try to give grace as best as I can. And I think that's super key because, you know, as we talk about a lot of good principles in this episode, they're not all going to happen all the time. And there has to be grace for it. So I love to hear that. And I think that's a good closing thought. As we end this episode, Calyb, Caden, thank you guys so much for hopping on the episode. It was so good. And I'm so excited for people to hear that. Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you so much. We were we had a blast. Awesome. We were so excited.
Yeah. Good deal. I was super pumped to do a relationship series. And I have so many people from school that I'm like, man, I think they'd be great to be on the podcast. Caden, you were one of those people. Calyb, I've never met you before today. So I'm super glad.
I know until now.
Yeah. So awesome, man. Thank you guys again so much for coming on. And if you are still listening to the episode this far, make sure that you give it a like, you subscribe, comment, share, whatever you got to do, share with your friends. We got to get the word out there that the Life Podcast is for everybody. So Calyb, Caden, thanks again. And we will see you guys right back here next week.